Hey AP Lang teachers, Coach Hall here. Normally during the school year, I post tutorial videos on my channel to help teachers and students prepare for the AP Lang exam. However, this summer I wanted to do something a little different, and that is I wanted to focus on teachers specifically, how we can prepare for our upcoming school year. So in this video, we're going to be talking about some different things to consider as you put together your AP Lang syllabus. Before we begin, I'd like to take a second to invite you to join my AP Lang teacher email list. You'll find the link to this and other resources in the description box below. So when you join the email list, you'll receive my tips for teaching rhetorical analysis. During the school year, I typically send out emails either weekly or bi-weekly, depending on how things are going, full of different tips and free resources, video updates, things like that. So I'd love to have you join, that way you can stay connected. A lot of new AP Lang teachers want to know what they need to do about their syllabus. So you do actually have a couple options. You can create your own from scratch using the College Board's standards and things like that. Some teachers have already done this, and they've even posted their syllabus in some of the different Facebook groups, allowing others to use it as well. So there is that option. I do know of a few teachers who've tried it, and they've actually had to redo the syllabus a few different times in order to finally get it approved, and it added a little bit of extra stress. So the path of least resistance, in my opinion, and what I know a lot of veteran teachers have done, is simply just adopt the College Board's units. And so basically it gives you the standards and the pacing. There's even a pre-approved syllabus out there that I'll link in the comments below in case you want to check it out. And you still have the freedom to customize it to your students' needs. You can still swap text in and out depending on what you want to cover and things like that. But it's a way to make sure that you're focusing on the skills and the right progression of skills and things like that. So if you feel overwhelmed, or if you're just not sure which text to teach or things like that, I would definitely recommend starting out with the units and kind of seeing what they did on that pre-approved syllabus. But if you want to start from scratch and do your own thing, that's totally okay as well. Just know that sometimes that process does become a bit trickier. Another really common question is, do I need a textbook? And if so, which ones are recommended? So the two that I see people talking about the most are the language of composition. The most recent edition, I believe, is the 3rd edition. And then also the AMSCO textbook, which is from Perfection Learning. It was actually co-authored by Tim Freitas, who does the Garden of English channel. So if I were to choose a brand new textbook, I would actually be more inclined to lean toward the AMSCO personally, because it seems to be a bit closer in line with some of the new changes in AP Lang. That being said, my school actually does have the language of composition. We purchased the 3rd edition a few years ago, and I really do like the way they laid out the book in terms of thematic units. I feel like there's lots of usable pieces in there, and the teacher's edition is actually quite helpful. So I really don't think you can go wrong with either, but if you want something that's a bit newer and a bit fresher, I would go AMSCO. Both of those textbooks are very comprehensive when it comes to preparing students for the exam, but one of the things that I noticed over the past couple years is, because I love rhetorical analysis so much, I found myself wanting to go deeper than what some of the textbooks actually allowed for. And so because of that, I created my own ebook called Mastering Rhetorical Analysis. And I actually launched it this past spring. It's something that I'm going to be using in my classroom with my own students. It's not a textbook in the same way that the others are, but it is kind of like a step-by-step guide to writing a rhetorical analysis essay. I tried to tailor it to student-friendly language and just use some of the techniques that have helped my students be successful on the exam. So if you're curious to see what that one looks like, I'll leave a link in the description below. This is more of a general reminder, but as you are planning your AP Lang syllabus and also your curriculum in general, you want to be mindful of different district and state policies that might affect what you teach or how you teach it. It's important to know your state and district policies, because that might affect some of the texts that you select. So in some districts, I know teachers are still required to incorporate poetry and fiction, even though AP Lang predominantly focuses on nonfiction. Another question that teachers sometimes ask is, do I need to incorporate a longer work into my AP Lang curriculum? So there are several popular books that teachers have included in their syllabus, things like Just Mercy or Educated. And if you need to or want to include those, you absolutely can. I personally do not include a longer work in my syllabus because we focus on exam length pieces, or roughly so. Some of them are longer than exam length, but in general, they're not a novel length text. And part of the reason why is because in my district, my students have already had exposure to novel length nonfiction in 10th grade, and they will be exposed to it again as 12th graders. So we just kind of have the policy that in our AP Lang class, we focus on the shorter works. Another option, if you want to include a longer work, but you're not really sure if it would fit in your curriculum, because let's face it, class time is precious, would be to do some sort of independent reading assignment. So that could work for your students if you do want that longer text incorporated in there. Or you can also pull different excerpts from a longer work. So maybe not read the entire thing, but choose passages that would be appropriate to the unit that you're studying. Something else to consider as you're planning your syllabus and curriculum is whether or not you're going to offer a mock exam. I personally recommend that teachers do this because it helps students get used to the rigor and stamina of the test, but there are different ways to approach this. One of the things you need to think about is when you're going to offer the mock exam, because you want to make sure that your students have had an appropriate amount of instruction before you actually offer that exam. So in my state, Arkansas, a lot of schools actually do a mock exam right at the end of the first semester. So for us, we offer a multiple choice test and a synthesis essay in December, and then the students do the second half of the exam, so rhetorical analysis and argument, in January. And part of that is because we have a conference where a lot of us meet up, we exchange essays and score each other's essays. And that way students have feedback from their teacher as well as a teacher who doesn't know them. Now, I know a lot of other states do it differently. They do it in like March or April, where the students have had about 70 to 75% of their instruction already. And that way it can help them prepare for the exam as well. So one of the things that I like to emphasize to my own students about a mock exam, though, is that it's to see where they are at that point. There's still room to grow. So we don't want to be too comfortable and too confident, but we also don't want to think that it's a failure and the world is over simply because we didn't get the score we wanted. So you want to really think about when you're going to offer this exam and what it's going to entail, because you want to make sure that your students have a certain level of skill before they embark on that endeavor. You want to set them up for success, but at the same time, it's not the end of the year. It's not the real deal. So it's a good way to kind of gauge progress. And I also really like looking at the results of the mock exam, especially closer to that mid-year point, because it does influence my instruction a little bit. It allows me to see which skills have stuck and which ones we still need to revisit. While I really like the way that the College Board has broken down their standards as far as helping teachers understand the expectations of the course, I think sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. So one of the things that I've done for the past couple years is I've created my own skills list. And these are just expectations that I have for my students. And I break it down into different categories. So first of all, I focus on some of the standardized testing skills. For instance, my students take the ACT. So I write down maybe 5 to 10 grammar skills that they need to know to be successful on that. I also think about the speaking and listening skills that they need, because there is a discussion component in my class, and I think that's a life skill. And then I break it down into general writing skills. So these are skills like embedding evidence, where it's involved in multiple types of essays. And then I focus on the 3 types of essays for AP Lang. So what specific skills do they need to know to be successful on those? And even though it sort of comes out to roughly the same thing as what the College Board says, I like having it in my own language. And I like being able to say, okay, my students have already mastered this skill before they got to my class, or here's a skill that's sort of in progress, and I intend for them to be more comfortable with it by this point in the year. And then there's also some skills on there where I know they haven't heard of it before or been exposed to it before, and so that means that I need to make sure that I incorporate that into my lessons as well. Another reason why I like having my own skills list that I've customized to my students is that it allows me to consult that list when I'm doing my lesson planning, so I can make sure that I'm emphasizing the different topics that they need help with instead of just revisiting topics they already know. So now that I've given you some different things to think about as you're planning your syllabus and your curriculum, it's time for my personal favorite part, which is selecting texts. I don't know why I like this so much, but each year I reevaluate which texts I taught in the previous year. Did the students connect with them? Did I like them? Do I want to reuse them? Do I want to replace them? I just find it really fun. So there are sort of 2 different approaches that I've used in the past to help come up with the texts that I teach in my classroom. So first of all, I've done several thematic units, and I actually really like these because it provides different perspectives on a given issue. And if you have the language of composition textbook, then the chapters already have a specific focus. Like there's one about education, there's one about sports, and they've paired a lot of these texts for you already, which is really convenient. Though you can do some of the legwork yourself and come up with your own units as well. So one of the things that I like about that textbook is that they integrate different types of the 3 FRQ prompts. So that way you can do a synthesis prompt if you want to, or you can focus on argument if you want to. So the thematic units can be really helpful. Something else that I've done though is what I call a skills-based unit, and I only do this at certain points in the year. But for instance, one of the things that my students told me a couple years ago is that when we were incorporating synthesis specifically into different units, they felt like they just got a handle on it, and then we went back to rhetorical analysis. And so they suggested just doing a synthesis unit. And so I usually do this right before our semester test, which is our mock exam that I was talking about. And that has helped my students exponentially. So what I do is I choose a few different prompts that are related, and I do sort of a gradual release approach. So we'll do one together as a class where we'll go through the sources together, we'll talk about it together, and then maybe the next time I'll time them for 15 minutes or so, let them annotate independently, and then they'll talk about their annotations with a partner, and we'll do more of like a whole class approach later on. And we gradually release until they have to do a timed write by themselves. And that's one of the things that I would also recommend you incorporate into your lessons is allow time for timed writes. It doesn't always have to be a full essay. You can even do a timed paragraph, but it's helpful for students to get used to the pressure, so to speak, of having the clock running in the background. So that's something I would suggest as well, is as you're planning out your units, start small and maybe give more time than needed, but make sure you're incorporating timed writing into your units. And it can be something that you've already discussed in class. It doesn't have to be a cold read, like a brand new piece, but you want to make sure that they have exposure to the writing process. If you're in the process of creating your syllabus for the first time, or maybe you just want to revamp your syllabus and you want some text recommendations, I did put together a list that I will link in the description box below. Basically, these are texts that my students have really enjoyed reading and discussing in the past. Now, please keep in mind, this is not intended to be viewed as a syllabus. It's just some suggestions of things that my students have really liked in the past. So while you're checking out that link in the description below, don't forget to make sure you are signed up for my AP Lang teacher email list. One of the things that I want to do this summer is create videos that are useful to teachers as they're preparing for the upcoming school year. So if you guys have any topics that you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already done so, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel and turn those notifications on so you don't miss any future teacher tip videos.